welcome to episode 3 of this second season of a Justice Seeking Church here at Shoreline Methodist Community. I'm Wayne Grucock, minister here at Shoreline. The Methodist Church has a target that we will be aiming at being net zero by 2030. That's as far as carbon emissions go. An ambitious target, some might say a target beyond us, but it's a target for us that we should and need to be aiming for. As Christians, we are called to care for God's creation, to stand alongside those who are most affected by climate change, to do what we can to play our part. So today, Dr. Hamish Leese is back with us. Hamish is here with a guest to further our knowledge and to broaden our understanding. Hi, Hamish. Great to have you back with us.
Thank you for inviting me back. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, really good. So you were with us last time with John. What's new? What new things perhaps do we need to know since then?
It's always changing and moving, as you said, with the 2030 goal being realistically quite close. Lots of things are moving and changing. A couple of things that I thought I would draw your and everybody's attention to is for anybody who is involved with church buildings. I know that may not be everybody with Shoreline, but I'm sure there are some who it will be. We now have a net zero property officer within the connectional team. That's Anna Newlove, and her role is to support and help managing trustees or just anybody who's involved with church buildings in their journey towards net zero. So she would be a great person to contact with questions or to get inspiration or examples of ways that we might be able to move our buildings towards net zero, because we understand, of course, that is one of the really big challenges as we move towards 2030. For those who maybe are not involved with church buildings, but church communities, the Eco Church, so we partner with Eco Church. They have released a new survey, which is updated. It looks at a few different things, but it's easier to engage with if you don't have a church building or you use a community building or something along those lines. So do check out Eco Church if you are interested in doing that. And I think the other thing I would just flag up is around the Eco Community Network, but I'm not going to say too much about that right now because my guest Kathy and I will talk about that in a few minutes.
Brilliant. Well, I'll hand over to you, and I must admit, Kathy, when you appear, you I think are winning the competition of the longest job title of the guests on a Justice Seeking Church. So yeah, we're really looking forward to hearing your conversation.
Thank you so much for joining me, Kathy. It's great to have you here. I feel a little bit bad that I'm introduced as the guest when really you're the one here to help us to learn and find out a little bit more. But it's great to be able to spend the time with you.
Oh, lovely to chat with you today. And yes, I do have a very long job title, particularly when you add the Newcastle upon Tyne to the beginning of it. And often people ask me about the evangelism and justice, whether they actually sit together. And actually, I don't think you can separate the two. I don't see how you can want to share God's love with people without also wanting justice for people and vice versa. So yeah, often spark some conversation.
Yeah, and in some ways it's the second, I don't know if it's a second part of a job title or a second job title, but it's, as co-chair of the Climate Justice Priority Collaboration Group, you're able to talk to us a little bit about climate justice within the life of the Methodist Church. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the Climate Justice Priority Collaboration Group?
Yes, by all means. So the group's been meeting over, it must be about 18 months. So brought together really to talk about how the church responds to issues of climate justice. And out of that collaboration group has grown the Eco Community Network, which I know you mentioned earlier. And that's really a space for people to gather talk about climate justice, to talk about what's happening locally, nationally, different campaigns, and support and encourage each other in sort of our walk towards a fairer climate, and justice for people that are affected by climate, as well as what we do with our buildings and with the spaces that we occupy as Christians.
And that's something that anyone can get involved in, isn't it? The Eco Community Network.
Oh yes, absolutely, yeah. So we're meeting online 4 times a year at the moment. We have a big gathering where people come together to hear from speakers, and then it's very active on Facebook. So there's updates pretty much daily on Facebook. Again, people sharing things that are happening in their local area, but also the national campaigns, and just ways to get involved and to do our bit.
And it's a great place as well to be able to sort of ask questions, share knowledge, find others around the country who are on the same journey, really, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I think that's one of the joys, actually, is that there's always somebody more knowledgeable. There's always somebody who's a step ahead of us on our journey, and being able to ask those questions, like, how did you do this with a listed building or whatever it might be? There's always somebody who knows where to find the answer, or where to sort of point to for more information.
Yeah, and there's a group on Facebook, isn't there? Is that right?
There is, yes. Yeah, if you search Eco Community Network, you'll come across that.
Wonderful. And there's also an online gathering, a Zoom gathering, coming up in May as well, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah, so that will be a great chance for everyone to come together and in conversation as well.
Yes, absolutely. Certainly the last few gatherings we've had, the numbers have increased every time, so we're hoping for the same this time around.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I've been involved in the gathering so far, and they've been really great places, full of energy and conversation, which is fantastic.
Yes.
So you mentioned the how evangelism and justice go so well together, and we've been talking about climate justice. Where do you see the kind of role of justice within the climate work? How do you see those fitting together?
So I think justice really looks like a world that is fair, a world where everybody has enough, but also I think where we're not over-consuming, not taking more from the creation than we need to, and where we're really mindful of the choices that we make, and how that affects other people and how it affects the climate too. And I think you see that in so many different ways. It's not just the big things. We can make a difference in very, very small things. So seeking justice by the way that we buy things, the way that we travel, all sorts of different ways that we can seek justice for the climate. But I think recognizing that there are people involved, that there are people who are on the receiving end of bad choices, really, to do with climate. I think it's when you connect it with people, that's when perhaps it has more impact.
Yeah, and I think it's fairly well known that the impacts of climate change, which are already being felt, we've been hearing about them in the last, particularly in the last year or so, but before that, and they do have a disproportionate impact on the people who've done least to cause climate change, and also perhaps have the least material means to deal with the impacts. Yes,
you're right, and I think we need to hear those stories and see that impact for it to really make a difference to us.
Yeah, and as you say, then it can also sometimes feel like such a big, intractable problem. But when we're thinking about it in terms of some of those small things, both in terms of the people who are impacted and the people around us and the people that we might be able to have an impact on, that really kind of brings it into perspective, doesn't it?
It does, and I think there's sometimes a bit of inertia that happens where we look at a problem and think, gosh, this is too big for us to solve. But actually, all of the small steps that we take add up. And I think it's recognizing the impact of small steps, but also thinking about what can we do, what's available to us to do, what choices can we make, and I guess the campaign I've been reading about most recently is Christian Climate Action's campaign to get people thinking about where their money is, and not just banking, but also pensions and things like that. And if you're fortunate enough to have investments, where is that money held, and what do those institutions do with that money? And actually, the research, I think, suggests that by having our money in places that don't invest in fossil fuels, that can have as big an impact as not flying and other things like that. So it's something that we're all capable of having some impact on.
Yeah, and there's some really great work which is going on around that at the moment. You mentioned Christian Climate Action. I think they're working with others like Just Money Movement and others like that, which
absolutely.
As you say, helps. It can be a difficult one when we're thinking about banking and all of those things to get our heads around. And there are groups which have done some really great work to help us to really engage with those things, because unfortunately, big banks are still investing billions of pounds every year in fossil fuels and extraction and development. Yeah,
and those organisations help us to unpick and almost trace back to where our money is held, because sometimes that's really difficult to work out. And banks will publish statistics about how much they do care for the environment, but there's an element of greenwashing that goes on there as well. So definitely using those resources to help us understand what is actually happening is a good thing.
Yeah, greenwashing is one of those terms that's people have become a lot more familiar with, I think, in recent years, where companies make bold claims about what they're doing for the environment and to reduce emissions and whatever it might be, but actually perhaps disguising that their actions don't quite meet up to the lofty words that they use.
But actually, I think as a term, it applies to ourselves as well. And I think we have to look at ourselves and what we're doing, and think, is there an element of greenwashing that's going on for me? And do we need to consider that too?
I guess we talked a little bit there about some of the real challenges that come with this, but where do you see hope in this work? I think sometimes it can be difficult with everything going on to identify those strands of hope. So where do you see hope in this?
I think it's often in the very small things, where you see a church that's pushing ahead with Eco Church despite their building, despite things being stacked against them. They're making strides forwards, and I can think of a couple of churches locally that are moving forwards with that. Churches that are making decisions about replacing boilers and all sorts of things like that. That actually, when you hear the discussion and you hear the passion that people have to want to make a difference, that's what gives me hope. And I think God's given us this lovely picture of how things can be and how things should be. And every little step that we take towards getting back to that state just helps to motivate, I think, and helps to say, yes, we can do this and we can achieve what we need to.
Yeah. One of the things with buildings is it can sometimes feel a little bit technical, or that we're kind of being a bit distracted from some of the things that maybe we feel like the church should be doing. But it's great to hear there's real passion involved in those things as well, and the impact that can be made.
Yeah, and I think that's where having good partners comes in, isn't it? Because I mean, most of the technical stuff is way over my head, but I'm very grateful to be able to go to other organisations and say, what's the right thing to do here? Help us weigh up the options that we've got. And I think working in partnership means that we don't have to be experts in any of these areas, really. There are people who are, and we can use their knowledge, and they're very willing to share that knowledge too.
Yeah, and I think that's, we talked about the Eco Community Network and the Facebook page and the gatherings. I think that's a great example of being able to share some of that. But it is also about kind of looking outside the church, isn't it? As you say, forming those partnerships, finding perhaps people in the community that are on this journey with us.
Yes, I think this is where there's an opportunity for the church to really be outside of its buildings and to be involved with community, because there are people who are just as passionate about climate justice in the local community as inside the church. And it's really an area of common ground where we can come together. And the church doesn't have to be leading on this, but we have to be around the table. We have to be in the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think that, we've already talked about the role of faith in this and how we see the importance of justice. And I think there is an important voice for the church there. But absolutely, we're not the only ones on this journey. We're not the only ones who care for the world around us and the impact that we have on that world and other people.
Yes, yeah, you're right. And you look at sort of businesses, B Corps, all those type of things. And there's a real opportunity for the church to say, let's come alongside, let's work with you on this battle, really, because it's a big thing that we need to do, and we're much stronger working together.
Yeah, and it's that inviting people in, but also stepping out and stepping into those places as well, and hearing other people's perspectives, which is brilliant.
Yeah. And I think when you think about justice generally, historically the church has been in that position of power in a lot of cases, but actually we're not in a position of power on this one. I think we're behind the curve in a lot of ways, so let's work with people to overcome the challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess this question is linked with where we see hope, but where do you see God at work in this? Where do you see where do you see God at work within our what we're doing, but also in the wider world as we engage?
I think it's a difficult question, really. I think I see God at work all over the place. I think every day you can spot signs that where God's at work in people's lives and in the conversations. And I think for me that's mostly where I see God is in conversations between people, where there is that sharing of knowledge and resources, and people encouraging each other. So that might be, here's our story of how we did it. Do you want to try? Or I'll come alongside you while you try too. And I think for me, it's all about relationships and those connections between people. And I love it when you see the church being invited into other spaces, and the church taken seriously in other spaces because we have something to contribute. And I think we've got something to learn in those spaces too, and we go into those spaces willing to learn, then that's when we stand to make the most difference.
Yeah, going in with kind of open hearts and open minds into those spaces, as you say. Perhaps we have a voice to share, but we also can hear all of those voices from other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we mentioned right at the beginning, didn't we, that the important role of individuals and people within this, and it's that relationality, those conversations, and where you see people's passion coming through as well as in God's work.
Yeah. And I think it all goes back to people, doesn't it? So I mean, it's people who are making decisions in the top tables of government. It's people who are making decisions whether to invest in fossil fuels and banks and things like that. So it's all very relational. And I guess you never know where a conversation leads. It may be that you just happen to have a conversation on a bus with someone who works for one of the top banks that are funding fossil fuels. You just don't know.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the way God works in all of this is that we don't necessarily know, but we can do what we can in and as part of that justice mission. So brilliant. So we run out of time very quickly with these things, but what would you bring before? What would you like people to perhaps look to pray for? What would be good focus for us as we move forward with this?
I think prayer for church communities who haven't yet started on an eco journey, for churches that are maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed and thinking this is just another thing to do, that they would just find something. And I think it's just finding the one thing to start with. It doesn't have to be huge, but just something to start with. So prayers that churches can find their thing, whatever it might be, and can take the first step, because the next steps get easier once you've taken the first one. So
yeah, kind of overcoming that initial hurdle, and
yes.
And I think hopefully perhaps we've talked about the conversations and how they can reach people, and perhaps somebody hearing this will be at the start of that journey themselves, and perhaps we can, we've mentioned a couple of things already, but how would you encourage people to start if they're feeling perhaps moved by this conversation, or this is just coming at a good time because they've been hearing other people talking about it? What would you suggest as a starting point?
I think it's have some conversation. Maybe as part of worship, or over a coffee morning, or something like that. Have some conversation and find out what is the one thing that people are keen to do. And if you get 2 or 3 people that say yes, let's do this one thing, then you've got a good start, haven't you? I think if you're the only person, it's a really hard slog. But get a couple of people together, and it doesn't matter what that first step is really, so long as they actually get started.
Yeah, brilliant. And if you're looking to find others who do care about this, and perhaps finding it difficult where you are, we've mentioned the Eco Community Network. I'll mention it again. There we go. Thank you. Have search on Facebook for the Eco Community Network to find like-minded people on there. I think Eco Church is another wonderful resource. Do have a look at Eco Church to find all kinds of resources on there. It's not only about church buildings, as I mentioned before. You can find all kinds of things there about worship, about community engagement, about land, all of those things there as well. So yeah, some really good places to start. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kathy. As I say, I feel being introduced as the guest, I feel like that's putting it strongly when I'm just here to enable conversation, but I really appreciate what you've been able to share with us today.
Well, it's been lovely to chat with you as always.
Thank you very much. And I will hand us back to Wayne.
What small steps can we take? Can we make? As was listened to Hamish and Kathy, this whole concept of marginal gains is so important, isn't it? Don't be defeated by the big picture. Take that first step. Be inspired. I think also Kathy briefly talked about the concept of enough. That is a fascinating concept. What is enough for me? What is enough for you? What is enough for all of God's creation? Really, for me, something to ponder more than we can here. But something I think we need to consider. What is enough? So I think just be encouraged. Be encouraged to join in. Be encouraged to be part of these conversations. Be encouraged to ask your questions, to be inspired, and then to be proactive and make those small changes, the small changes that you can. And my encouragement is share what you're doing. Use this hashtag on social media, Justice Seeking Church. We're here to encourage and inspire and to learn and to do what we can, what we're called to do. So big thank you to Kathy, to Hamish, and to all of you who are part of these conversations. Next week, we have Ian Rutherford. He's back to talk to us this time about homelessness. So let's carry on communicating, carry on sharing. God bless.